to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
So this is an unusual Christmas 2023 because normally I don't record any episodes on Christmas Day. This year I am recording 2 episodes. Did one earlier today, now doing a second one. We're kind of turning the tables here a little bit, which is kind of appropriate because we're going to turn the tables with the topic too. We're going to talk about An End to Upside Down Thinking, which is a book you discovered, Joel. Interesting title, but tell us about the book.
Well, the book's concept, it discusses consciousness, and it debates consciousness, the origins of consciousness, the separation of the brain from consciousness, gets into a lot of quantum theory. It goes into a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in various factors, law of attraction, and it's sort of the like the placebo effect and all the stuff that you and I are into. And it goes in. It doesn't bring any brand new information to the table, but it just sort of repackages a lot of the stuff that we already know. And the attempt in the book is to sort of, be fair and unbiased. But he clearly has a bias in the book. I mean, it's just, it's like, I give you credit, like he'll say, well, here's, with great enthusiasm, he'll explain, some quantum entanglement theory. And they said, however, here's what this guy says, it disagrees with it. It's okay. So the book itself is, it's not an unbiased approach. And it doesn't solve any, it just debates topics you and I have talked about. And it at the end of the book, you're looking for, the end of upside down thinking. He's going to solve this for us, and he doesn't. He doesn't. So, spoiler alert: it's not.
So what we're saying here is basically that the title, like so many titles these days, is misleading. It doesn't actually end upside down thinking.
It does not. But it does help point out a lot of the stuff. For example, the CIA did a lot of studies in the early 90s on law of attraction was one of the topics, remote viewing. If you know what remote viewing is, right. And they did a lot of these topics, and they shockingly found, there's something to this. Statistically, we're there. However, somehow it got buried, and a lot of the bias against that type thing just sort of said, well, they dismissed it. Well, if you read the CIA files, they don't dismiss it. They in fact, President Carter actually is on record as saying, we had one of these remote viewers find, I believe it was a Russian airplane, and gave the exact coordinates. This is President Carter. I mean, not he's a pretty genuine guy. And so
if I remember correctly, the general take on President Carter revealing this, President Carter revealed this almost accidentally.
He did.
And the take was, we really wish he hadn't done that.
Yeah. And so it gets into a lot of the stuff like you and I've talked about, which I really did enjoy about the book, like the placebo effect, for example. Why is it dismissed? Why is it considered, that's just the placebo effect, instead of saying, oh my God, we got the placebo effect at play here,
Yeah, right.
So it looks at a lot of this, and then people who have historically gotten behind anything that's sort of considered woo-woo or out of the mainstream, right, you're automatically sort of categorized as crazy. And so you have a lot of people that don't want to talk about it. These are well-credentialed people. But yet so many people, so this is what the book was really talking about. A lot of these things that traditional science, traditional medicine, traditional thinking sort of dismisses. So the idea that our consciousness exists outside of the brain, that is a separate, some people would call it a soul, whatever, that there's an energy that exists within us that is separate from. It is somehow stored, it's almost like the cloud, so to speak, or whatever we are. But it's it gets into that. It's a pretty good concept. I factually, I don't factually, but I really believe in my world. I understand my consciousness. I understand I have an energy. This energy has no possible way of dying. The physical housing will eventually wear out, but the energy itself, I could easily see where this energy would just keep going and going and going. And so he touches on a lot of that, but the idea that we still don't know so much. And then when you link a lot of the quantum theory, a lot of the quantum entanglement, a lot of the stuff that we've always just sort of said we don't really understand, it really supports the idea to me. There's enough evidence that, yeah, if you're going to look at, if you're weighing it not as a proven, this is a guaranteed thing, but to understand there is consciousness, we have to start with, you and I are talking, so we have to acknowledge consciousness. The question is, where does it exist? And is it something that does every creature have consciousness? And the debates go into really deep dives and all of that. And I found the book really fascinating. I always read the reviews of the books. There's some people that really liked it. A lot of people thought it was just, like you said, sort of a misleading title. But it just repackaged a lot of Dr. Dispenza, Joe Dispenza stuff, Bruce Lipton stuff. So a lot of, again, law of attraction stuff is sprinkled in there as well. So it's a good attempt at just putting it all together. And if this was your first rodeo and you never read any book about any other stuff, it would get your mind thinking. But it's not one of my high recommended books because it doesn't cover any really new ground.
Yeah, well, it's one of those topics that's kind of hard to find new ground.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, completely.
It's not like it's kind of lying around like, okay, we know where all the new ground is. We're going to go over there.
Right.
It doesn't quite work that way. You said something else too, and I understood completely what you meant about it. I think everybody else did. You referred to one of my favorite little non-truth truisms, a reference to scientific proof. And I just like to throw it out every single time that comes up, that there is no such thing. There is no such thing as scientific proof because science is not engaged in the act of proving anything. It never has been. But it also has a very interesting corollary that goes along with it, which is we're talking about, like you said, quantum physics, among other things. And in quantum physics, one of the basic concepts is that something exists and tends to behave based on whether or not something else, an intelligence, a consciousness, is giving attention to it.
Yeah.
So if you give a conscious attention to something, it's over here. If you don't give conscious attention, it's over here. And that's a kind of a bizarre topic. It's also a topic that kind of illustrates this whole idea of there's no such thing as proof. There's only evidence of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So if we're looking for, I mean, I kind of, tongue in cheek said, well, the title is a lie. Actually, the title, the idea that people associate with what the title says is where the lie is. The lie is in the idea that there's such thing as true thinking or false thinking. There really is no such thing, one way or the other.
Well, yeah, and as we are human beings, we're housed in this casing of human beings, so to speak. So we can only understand with the limits that exist as human beings exist. So
right.
That's the underlying thing. That why we won't understand a lot of this is we have to base everything in the physicality as we know it, as the physics exists that we know. Like me as matter, like I am with a body that I'm in, I can't travel at the speed of light if I had even the ability to do it without turning into light. That's the concept of Einstein's theory. However, there are things that travel faster than the speed of light. And so you're having this, okay, it's really hard to comprehend. Like the idea that if you want to drive yourself crazy one evening is try to really comprehend forever. It's just, you can't as humans comprehend forever. We know what it means, but since everything we know has a beginning and an end, as physicality goes, then we can't have the capacity to really understand it. Now, I believe when this ends and you transition to the non-physical, all that becomes it's none of this stuff is even remotely complicated. But to us, it's only complicated because we have to view it through the limitations of what we have right now in our brain and how physics exists on our planet.
And because we have to understand this stuff through inference. I mean, like you said, we don't really comprehend forever. simply
Right.
because we can't see it, we can't taste it, we can't touch it, we can't play with it in any way. We can only infer it based on, well, if you just keep raising the numbers high enough, they go on forever. Oh,
Right.
there's forever. It's an inference.
Yes. Yeah. And we know the general theory of it, but it just the idea of you have to understand it based on, as we talked about before, if I were to go back into ancient Greece right now with my cell phone and shotgun, I would be a god.
Oh yeah.
Because all I have to do is blow somebody's head off and show them my cell phone. And they go, "Wow, what an awesome guy!" I mean, they'll all bow down, and they have these legends about it. And it isn't that I'm obviously any better than them. It's just I had technology that they didn't quite comprehend. They would view that as godlike, and just because they have no point of reference with that. So what we're viewing, it's no different than me going back to ancient Greece. Than what we're trying to look and understand. We just don't have that capacity.
Right, exactly. So with that context in mind, let's revisit what this book and this title is all about. And I'm going to throw something out there. You tell me whether or not you think we're on the right track here, or that I'm on the right track here. When we're talking about an end to upside down thinking, which is actually more of a metaphor than anything else, what we're really talking about is consciousness something that is created within our brain as a physical process, or is consciousness something that is outside of that? That is whatever that means. Who knows what that means? I have no idea what that means. Whatever that means, it's the other thing.
Right. Yes. And that becomes, as I sit and think, as I do often about these type things, I feel that all this is taking place right here. And, that's where my head. Now, do I feel that it's taking place in my brain because I've told that's where all this is? I don't know. It feels like this is where all this is coming from, but I don't really know that's where it's coming from. It's just my entire life is this is where you think. So clearly, it's taking place there. So is the mind housed within the brain? Is the mind simply a invisible type thing that is created in a connection with the brain? Why I do know there's some type of connection is we were talking about like genetics and epigenetics and healing and faith healing and just the general topics of the mind's influences on the body to make you sick or make you well. There's certainly the body physically responds to our mind one way or another. It's responding physically. If somebody's having a panic attack, none of the stuff they're panicking over is real. It's created within the mind, but the physical reaction is certainly real. So it's just it even adds to the question to me: is it housed within the and when you die? That energy is separated from the brain, and it's almost like this is the sort of the programming, all the stuff, the genetics, and all we've learned this life, previous life, all that's housed there. And then when this goes, that energy in my mind goes to to heaven or whatever your source energy is, I actually call it. And you may come back again or 100 times. I don't know, but that's how I see it happening. But I have no way of knowing that. I've just heard from other people. I know what I've experienced in some of my work. Some of my psilocybin experiences. This is some of the stuff that was revealed to me. So I happen to think that our mind is, I believe, is separate from the brain. But I think there's a connection. They go together. You wouldn't have access to your mind without the brain in physical form. Now, when physical form is gone, I still think that exists, if that makes any sense.
It does make sense to me. And you know what? I think on an intuitive level, we all understand that what you're saying is true.
Right.
The biggest challenge here is a lot of people have trouble with the idea of an intuitive level.
Yes.
Because intuition is not anything you can. Well, first of all, people like to prove things, which is silly because there's no such thing as proof in science. But nevertheless, they like to prove things, and they can't prove anything about intuition. So that causes doubt. It causes people to say, well, you can't disprove it, so it can't really exist. So, we got to be really skeptical about this whole idea of intuition. And yet, We all can feel it. We all sense that intuition. We may distrust it. We may not want to listen to it, but we all know it's there. We're all aware of it. We can feel it. It's just that we don't necessarily believe in it, or some of us do. And some of us actually have learned to trust to such a great degree that they can do what we call channeling. They can actually channel information supposedly from the non-physical.
Yes.
But that's the nub of it. The root of it is we all know this. There's this thing there that we can't identify in any physical sense. We can't do any tests on it other than inferentially. Does it really exist? And some say yes, some say no, and some say I have no clue.
Yeah. And well, and this is related, and I'll show you how I'll connect this in a second. But Harvard several years ago did an unbiased trying to see the medical value of acupuncture.
Okay.
And it's something that's been accepted as effective for thousands of years in Chinese medicine.
Right.
It's all over here. It's been accepted as helps with pain, helps with all these things. I know one person in particular who swears, and this is somebody I trust, a very good friend. He was a heavy smoker. And he went through 3 rounds of acupuncture that was set to help him quit smoking. And he put his cigarettes down after 3 days.
Wow.
Just put them down without any. And so now we can get into maybe why that exists. However, the study that we're talking about with Harvard, they were expecting to find, I don't know what they're expecting to find, but I think you'll know where we're going. But the test participants were all from Harvard Medical School.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So you're thinking, well, that would be a good, sampling. And shockingly, not shockingly at all, they found the results. Acupuncture was useless and had no value. It was all, it had no value because the participants believed going in, it's not real medicine. It won't have any value. And so it doesn't. And that's there's been other studies thousands of other studies that are done with general populations, whoever, and find acupuncture for a certain percentage of people works extremely well. And like I've always told you before, I've never believed, I don't think acupuncture is magical. I think your belief in acupuncture is incredibly magical. I am not a crystal guy. No disrespect to my crystal friends out there. They're just pieces of rock to me, or gems. However, if you believe your little shiny gem is magical and will heal your energy, I believe in that because you believe in that process. I really do. I'm not making fun of them. I really do. I personally think faith healing, no matter who you worship, it's the belief that that entity is healing you is all that matters. It's not the entity himself or herself.
It raises an interesting question too. If this thing that we're labeling as fake healing actually heals, is it fake?
Well, that's what we're going for. It's not fake. I actually have seen many people healed and cured from non-traditional methods. I know in my life, just the stuff that just changing my perspective, changing. When I took action to not be depressed and defeat my anxiety and do these things, and with my addiction, I feel I was healed from all of that by my actions and my belief system. It's, and again, people say, well, and I don't really care what people say, obviously, but it's something that I can speak to in my life. I know a lot of people that cure themselves by just doing these things and believing these things are effective to you. And that, again, placebo, nocebo, all of these type things, a belief in what you're doing is the strongest component of anything. If you believe your life sucks, you believe your life is miserable, you believe you're cursed, you absolutely are. I had a young man ask me last week, do you believe in curses? And I go, do you? And he goes, yeah, I'm cursed. I go, I believe you. I really do.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the title of the book some more, An End to Upside Down Thinking. And specifically, I'm focusing on the phrase upside down thinking. And it raises a question in my mind. Does the author consider the belief that the mind is is emanating from the brain to be upside down thinking, or is the belief that it is separate from the brain upside down? Which one's the upside down thinking?
Good question. He doesn't actually specifically answer that, but that's a good question. I think since traditional, I think he's probably going against tradition in the title. So I think the traditional belief that the brain is the sort of the mind secondary or whatever, and the debating consciousness itself is a hard topic to debate.
It is. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
I mean, the whole term upside down thinking, it's a judgmental term too.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
it has sort of a negative connotation to it, like, oh, well, you're so backward in your thinking. It's the same kind of an idea, right?
But it's also one of these books that are really, we've had a wave over the last several years of let's make really cool titles using profanity or these crazy things just to sell the title. You know what I mean? It's like, so I don't know how much energy went into that title other than it's a good title. It's we're going to end upside down thinking. We'll figure out what it is. And then a deep dive and go, yeah, I don't think so. But
it's actually one of my pet peeves where news is concerned. Of course, we've talked often about how it's not a good idea to pay attention to news anyway. But it's not just news, actually. It's almost all article writing these days.
Yeah.
It's amazing how infrequently a title of an article or an essay or a news piece or anything, a book, it's amazing how inaccurate the title is compared to the contents.
Oh yeah.
I mean, so often I'll read something that, they had this title that drew me in, and it doesn't even address what's in the title.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which basically tells me that what we're really doing is we're responding emotionally to what's going on in that title. We're not really responding to anything factual about it.
Yes.
And that's a key thing, because what we're talking about here with this whole idea of consciousness is directly tied into emotion. There's nothing else besides emotion that's driving the whole train, as far as I can tell. I mean, without emotion, is there consciousness? I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either.
Yeah. And again, we go back to the observable. I have one of my favorite people on the planet. You've heard me talk about it over the years. Is my neighbor kid. I've known him his whole life, and we've always been really close. He's 11 now, and he behaves differently with me than he does with his parents or friends. It's just, we have a really close bond. He'll talk to me about deep things. It's a great friendship, but he's not that way with anybody else. I've told his mother before, like, she goes, well, she said, I don't get to see that version of him. You do.
Right.
And so the influence that I have over him, and just of our years of friendship and the connection, he's a different child talking to me. He's a great kid, very positive kid. He's a normal 11-year-old. I'm not saying he doesn't do 11-year-old stuff, but he's different with me because of the influence of our longtime relationship. I've known him since he's been 4 years old. And so it's that really cool connection. There's people that are around you that are influenced differently. People behave differently around it. It's all connected. So the influence in what we're observing has an effect on things. And when everything shifted to chaotic news all at once, we had pandemics, we had all this political crazy, we had the news just totally going super biased on either direction, creating headlines, breaking news. I mean, it was exhausting. I don't watch the news, but anywhere I was at where there's like public news on, where like CNN would be playing in a doctor's office, they have breaking news every 8 seconds. And breaking news, it's it's not really breaking news, but it's just everything's an urgent crisis because that's how they make their money, getting viewers.
Yeah. So
this bias toward chaos, this bias toward this misleading, the internet led to all this clicking on things. It needs you to click on something to get to monetize it. So they'll have these crazy headlines, and you click on it, and it's like, oh, okay, well, it's not that big of a deal. But it leads you to click on it. It's that helps. Like in articles, they get very dramatic in their articles, and they often don't even remotely match.
One question I keep asking myself is, because you're right, that's exactly what happens. The way I would describe it is we're we are all being subjected to an ongoing test of exaggeration to see how long we'll put up with it.
Yes. Yes.
And the question I ask myself is, I wonder how long we will put up with it. I mean, at some point, do we become, just tired of the exaggeration and we just stop responding to it? Or does this keep going on forever? I don't really know the answer to that.
I don't either. It's probably not a good thing to think about because I don't know the catalyst to break this chain. The social media side of it, and there will be a catalyst. There will be something. There will be a change of perspective. I don't know if we get tired of it or there's just an event that makes it where we don't have time for it. I don't know what happens, but the idea that it's operating like it's operating. Everybody's reality is based on the news channel they watch. Like I had a friend at the gym asked me the other day before Christmas. He came up, really nice guy. Him and I get along really well. We never talked politics or anything on those lines, but he said, I wish you a Merry Christmas. He said, and he looked around and goes, is that politically okay to say?
Oh.
And I go, what? And he goes, well, everybody's so woke now, you can't say that. And I go, I have never met anyone who I told Merry Christmas to that didn't just say thank you or Merry Christmas, but never.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had anybody rebuke that. I haven't. Now, are there people that do it? I'm sure they do. But and I talk to a lot of people. I have never had anyone tell me, oh, you insulted me by saying Merry Christmas. Nobody's ever cared. So, but yet there's a narrative that's being monitored. Again, I know there's places that is, but what they do is like he had a belief that you can't say that. Well, that's what you can. And if somebody ever told me, oh, well, you can't say that, of course you can imagine how upset I'd be over that.
About this much.
yeah, you just don't care. But my point is, we have a narrative that things are falling apart because that's what like we're so divided. You can't say that there's if most people are really just happy you're speaking to them. Most, have a great holiday, have a very Merry Christmas. I have a lot of Jewish friends, and they never mind when I say have a Merry Christmas. They don't. They just say thank you. Same to you. It's just
right. Me too. Yeah.
I know they're Jewish. I mean, they have and they don't take offense to it. Most of them celebrate Christmas on some level anyway.
Yeah. Right.
I know a lot of Jewish friends that also have a Christmas tree. But it's this idea that there's a narrative out there that there's people monitoring me at the gym that I can't say Merry Christmas is an absurd narrative. And it's been sold that is the case. And it's just making it feel like we're all more divided than we really are.
Yeah. I really do get the feeling that to answer the question that I raised earlier, that I don't know exactly how precisely this plays out, but approximately, I think we do kind of get tired of the exaggeration to the point we stop paying attention to it.
Well, that's my point. Like using that example I used, that's an exaggeration of how bad things are. So eventually, people are going to start saying, "Look, that's just not true. Let's stop. Let's stop with this silly." But also once people, and this is the pendulum that will probably change when people start really being called out for their extreme crazy instead of it being sort of supported. When it's sort of called out, we're tired of people who are not serious. We're tired of absurdity. We're tired of exaggeration. When exaggeration quits being profitable is when exaggeration stops.
Yeah, that's right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Because that's like you said, that's what's driving the whole thing. The fact that you can monetize it, the fact that it's all click driven. That's where the exaggeration comes from. And I think we're already seeing signs of it. I mean, you mentioned politics. I think we're seeing it in political realm. People are just getting tired of the whole narrative. Left, right, middle doesn't make any difference. They're just tired of the damn thing.
Well,
I see the most common political memes I see are memes about how tired people are of the divide.
Yeah.
I don't see that many memes anymore. Here's my right wing view. Here's my left wing. I don't see that much anymore. There's some. It does exist, but there's a lot more of. I am so sick of this.
Well, and where everything is so exhausting, and you are not to get political, but it's this group who's in power now is going to investigate the previous group that was in power. And then when the new group comes into power, they're going to be having all the. This is an ongoing, ridiculous investigation. Nobody's going to jail here. You're not going to. It's an extra. You know where this is going on either side. It's just this ongoing thing that you just waste all this drama and energy, and we got to get it out where the non-serious people or absurd people are, their exaggerations are not tolerated. And that was, remember when in, I would say 1999, 90, somewhere around there, all of a sudden, this is a really crazy example, but the biggest thing was animation shows. Like The Simpsons had hit it big. All these shows were coming, and animation it took over. In fact, regular sitcoms for a while sort of offside. Animation was the big thing. And eventually, like, we still have some animated shows, but it's not, it's just not everything. It's just sort of, it went back to center. It went back to an acceptable thing. This exaggeration, crisis mindset, people are really tired of the absurdity of it all. And just, at the end of the day, I don't think we're all that different in what we really want. It's just that we're being sold that they're just trying to take away what matters from you all. That's why you got to vote for me, because that group is going to take away what matters to you. So side with me. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, well, it's a fear-driven thing.
Of course.
Who can push the fear button the hardest and the loudest and most often and most frequently?
Yes.
The belief is that that's what's going to get them the power that they want.
Right.
The interesting side effect that goes along with that is you push the fear button often enough, you end up being afraid. Not just that the people that you're trying to get to follow you are afraid. You're afraid, and your fear misleads you. Your fear takes you in directions you don't want to go in.
Well, it becomes your reality. It really becomes, when you play that game, you one of the things that somebody told me earlier, when I first got into this field, and it makes a lot of sense right now. I said, Joel, be very careful. So you're going to be going into a pit with monsters. Don't become the monster. And I didn't understand what he meant, but I deal with some really dark and deep and bad stuff, especially earlier in my career. And you got to be careful not to become the monster. And, one of the reasons I had to step away from, some of the assisting with child abuse investigations and stuff here, I could see me becoming the monster, and I could see myself cutting these people's heads off, like, you molest a child, I'll kill you. And I was like, and I had to get out of it, because it was just, I wanted to go around, I found myself having those thoughts, like, some guy confesses to doing this to his kid, and I'm going to sit here as a grown man and just not kill you. How's that possible? And I realized that was not for me. I had to step away. So when you fight monsters, you don't want to become a monster. When you're fighting all this fear stuff, or when you're projecting all that fear stuff as a tool, be careful not to get caught up in the fear.
I had an interesting experience today that in a way illustrates what we're talking about. And it's an experience that, in this particular case, it comes out of interacting on social media, but really it comes out of every aspect of our lives. We encounter this kind of behavior all the time. But I'm going to use this particular story as an example to illustrate. I run a number of Facebook groups that are all regionally based for counties here in Connecticut. There are 8 counties, and there's some other regional groups too. But I run these groups, and they're basically all about what's going on in each one of those counties. Because of how bad Facebook does in terms of doing its job of keeping bad actors out and scammers and all that kind of thing, those of us who administer groups find we have to take matters into our own hands and come up with strategies to keep them out and try to keep things, at a relatively sane and calm and balanced level. And one of the things that I've incorporated in the groups that I run is I allow local businesses to advertise periodically, not often, but periodically in the groups to promote what they're doing. But I put limits on that so that, because, people will go crazy with that kind of thing if they can.
Right.
One of the limits that I put in, and that I kind of acquired I reached this point over time through experimentation and found this is pretty effective for not only keeping the bad actors out, but also keeping the legitimate local businesses from overdoing it. I'm requiring any business that wants to post an ad in the group to include their business name, business address, and business phone number in the text of the ad. Sounds pretty straightforward. Sounds fairly simple. You would not believe how much resistance I've got, but nevertheless, it sounds pretty straightforward. Yeah, periodically I get the occasional small business entrepreneur pushing back on it, saying how ridiculous it is or how unfair it is or all that kind of thing. I had someone today who she runs I think it's a yoga group, yoga practice or service or something along that line. I can't remember exactly what she does, but it's along that line. And she was really pushing on the idea, well, all they have to do is click on my name and it'll take them to a page, to my Facebook page, where it shows my business name, my business address, my business phone number. I said, yeah, I understand that, but in order to keep things simple and consistent, and because we have to work within a rules-based format, I have to make sure that it goes into the text of the ad so that everybody does that, because not everybody puts all their address and phone and so forth on their business page. People do different things. They have different practices and so forth. So to keep it all consistent, it has to be in the text. She proceeded to just start hammering me on how ridiculous my rule was, how I was a narcissist, how I was a control freak, she's like going on and on with all this stuff. And I'm saying, well, if you don't want to follow the rule, you don't have to. You don't have to post in the group. I mean, this is just the rule for posting in the group. And she wouldn't stop. And I thought, this is really interesting. Look at how a very simple thing just kind of exploded out of her mind, to the point where she was accusing me of everything you could imagine. And if I did anything to push back, oh my God, and then she had to escalate to the next level. Well, how often do human beings do this? Every single day.
Yeah.
Continuously, right?
Yeah.
To me, this is a small illustration of how people bring exaggeration into the everyday world. We think that it's others who are exaggerating. We're the ones who are doing it. We all tend to do it one way or another at various times in our lives throughout our everyday lives. And there's just one small example of it.
Yeah. And people, like, first of all, when you hear about that, like, why would anybody object to that? That's so basic.
Yeah, I'm still having trouble with that one, but that's another topic.
But the problem is, the truth is, what she's spewing at you is she's the narcissistic, she's a narcissistic person. She's a control freak and doesn't want to follow the rules. The rules are there for a reason. I don't really need to debate them. I have people that will call me sometimes, and I have a few spots every week that I set aside for pro bono clients. They don't have to pay anything. But I have to limit that, or I would make no money. So I have a waiting list of pro bono clients. And finally, I just said, look, I'm 6 months, 8 months behind on pro bono clients, so I'm not going to take any more names right now. And so this lady sent me an email. She said, your system is unfair. And I said, I'm sorry, I just can't. She said, but I really need to talk to you, and I really need you. And I said, well, here, let me recommend several therapists that, if you have Medicaid, they'll be able to do this or do that. You should get. I specifically want you. And I said, well, I'm specifically booked up for pro bono cases for at least 6 months. And she said, when can I see you if I were to pay? And I said, well, probably be about 2.5, 3 weeks. She goes, well, I want one of those appointments, but I want it for free.
I love it. Hey, gotta give her points for creativity and nothing else.
Yeah. And finally, she just kept, this was all via email. Finally, I said, look, I'll keep you on the list. And, and I even can throw a sliding scale. She wants to pay nothing. I mean, she doesn't want to pay, $50, which is drastically lower than she wants to do nothing.
Right.
And so, but she has in her mind, and this exaggerate that somehow that, first of all, I'm the only one that she should talk to. Right. Don't understand that concept. Right. And that I must change everything to fit with that. And she's exaggerating. She said, you're causing me harm by not seeing me. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm going to stop this conversation. I'll let you know you're on the list. When it gets closer, I'll let you know. She said, well, save your time. I'm going to boycott you. I said, okay.
I
Now we're
love the
talking.
logic of this thing. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah. So okay, now we're talking. Thank you. And yeah, but it's just this exaggerated uh, self-centeredness. A lot of it, like this, I can't really describe it all. But the pendulum, the beautiful thing is the pendulums always swing other way. You never know what causes it. I think the perfect storm of a lot of things, COVID, the political system, everything that was in place, everything came together for a perfect storm to create this reality. There'll be another perfect storm come along that'll distract us. And this exaggerated, outrageous news cycle where everything is, fake clicks just to get there. When you look into it, it's just minimal type stuff. That eventually is going to get tiresome, and companies that do that will lose money, and that will be the thing that makes them stop.
Well, I actually have a theory along that line. My theory is that not all, but some companies are already losing money on it.
I believe that. Yes.
I think it's
I
really
believe
true.
that. Yes, I agree. Yeah.
I suspect that many are not. They're not pulling back from it because they've heard about others who make money using that approach. So they figure, well, they're just not doing it right in some way.
Right.
And
Right.
they haven't reached that point of excessive pain where, okay, we just got to stop. This is just too much. It's just a drain on our resources. But I mean, I just, from what I see of the advertising that's out there, just the advertising, the little bit that I see, it tells me that there are a lot of people who are spending a lot of money on stuff that isn't doing anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's you that will eventually change everything, and eventually the analytics will catch up with that, and they will. What is profitable drives things, and everybody's negativity, fake news, all this dramatic stuff drove things for both sides for so long. And you get your people all riled up, and you do this, and then people, it's almost like the people are like, we've been riled up for years. In my lifetime, do you know how many end of days, end of time prognoses I've heard? We've begun the end of time since I've been 12 years old.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm not even looking at it from the lifetime. I'm looking like in the last week.
Yeah.
How often does it happen, right? I mean,
yeah. And also we have a society that, with so much going on and a negative bias, and the us working toward, at the end of the day, no matter whether it's the upside down thinking we're talking about or whatever, one thing I keep getting back to is your perspective creates your reality, and your reality responds to your perspective, and that becomes everything. That dictates everything. So nobody can make you pull away as long as or get stuck in this, as long as you keep your perspective on what matters, and that's the key.
I think we've just brought in a really important concept where this topic of consciousness and where consciousness originates from, and does it come from the brain? Does it come from outside? Is it a part of who we are spiritually? All that kind of thing. I think we've touched on something that ties directly into that perspective, because everything that we understand about consciousness, as far as I can tell, everything that we understand about it has perspective. Without perspective, we don't really have a good way of saying, yeah, that's conscious.
Yes. Well, and that's why I've always said perspective is it's your most powerful weapon. Your perspective, it opens the door to, to me, the biggest proof of consciousness is you have your perspective, and you can change your perspective. And that is everything. Changing your perspective changes everything.
It does. It not only changes everything, it changes. It's where our power comes from.
That's all your power.
You were talking earlier about how powerful we are in terms of, well, we went off on this, I won't call it a tangent. We went off in this direction of talking about all the different ways that we exaggerate and so forth. But really what we're talking about here is how powerful the human mind is in creating all these narratives and using these negatives these narratives to drive what are usually negative topics, negative streams of awareness and consciousness and understanding. Narratives that are just storylines that are all negatively based, and they came out of the creativity of consciousness. They came out of the imagination. They came out of our minds.
Absolutely, and that's I perspective be based on everything. I find an entirely different view. And I'm realizing my reality was completely wrong because I was viewing it from the wrong way. And it was built on my perspective based on previous stuff that I had dealt with before. And so I once you open the can of, or the power of your perspective, to me, when I've had debates with people about consciousness, I will bring perspective to the equation. How I know I am conscious and independent is I can shift my perspective. I have that power. You can't interfere with that. Not that you would, Walt. You've tried. I mean, to be fair.
Well, I'm good at it sometimes.
Yeah,
Sometimes I can really just come right to the heart of it. But
yeah. I mean, it's like the baseball thing. I mean, come on. So, yeah. So, but the perspective.
By the way, you'll notice I haven't actually talked about football. Just kind of as a side note, because I'm actually following some football this year, and I don't want you to like take that like I've completely gone off baseball, because I can just see you could turn that into, oh, now he's finally seen the light. He's looking at football.
Well, I've influenced you. Thank you. I mean, there's nothing wrong with baseball for children. It's not. It's a kid's game. But anyway, this.
Oh, that was really sharp the way you did.
Well, it is. I mean, ball in the back. I mean, yeah. But let's not digress because we're gonna get that. But the influence of the people you're around is you have control over that. Not really in the way that most people think. I don't have to participate with people who are very negative. I don't have to get into the middle. I've learned that's not my place to be. It's not my job to go adjust their perspective. It's my job to not engage in their perspective. I don't want that. I'll step away. I'll walk away. I won't debate it. Not because there's zero value in it. I want to get away from that energy, not in the middle of it.
Well, that's the key right there. Is it energy that you want? I mean, because sometimes some people do want it. Let's be honest.
Well, yeah, they are. And I have people that I am so energy attracted to, and I love being around them. It's just, I want more time. And you almost can't quantify it sometimes. It doesn't really matter who they are. There's people I really enjoy being around, their energy. And there's other people that the moment they're in my orbit, I just feel I got to get up and get out of there.
Yeah.
And it's, so I just follow that. And I pay attention to the people that I'm attracted to energy wise. I'm trying to, I can never really identify it. It's not it's just, there's something about people's energy, that perspective of mine saying, I want the people that I'm getting that connection with. So I'm in control of that. I can do that. I don't have to force myself to be in positions where there's negativity in these other, this really ineffective way of thinking. So the upside down thinking that we were talking about is, it really gets back to what we always end up with is perspective based. Everything's perspective based. And that's going to be the answer almost every podcast. Spoiler alert, that's pretty much what we're going to end up with.
So, sure. Now that we've done over 2,000 episodes, you're trying to narrow it down to one. I get it. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, that's where I always end up. I always end up there. So.
Oh, that's fun. No, seriously though. I really am intrigued by this idea of upside down thinking, because there is a pejorative associated with it. And that's one of the things that we humans really like doing. If there's something, or maybe we don't like doing, depending on how you want to say it. If there's something that we want to look down our noses at, or we want to disagree with it, we'll find a pejorative way to describe it. So, well, that's upside down thinking. That's a way of saying I don't approve of that. I really think that's stupid or foolish or counterproductive. However you want to, whatever the reason is, I don't like it. I don't like that.
Right.
I don't like
right.
That's what that's all about. Isn't it interesting though how rarely we're able to come up with right side up thinking or similar narratives to that one? To me, that I've been mentioning this like for practically since I started the podcast, and I'm still amazed by how little language we have for things that we like. We have tremendous amounts of language. We have tremendous amounts of conscious attention to stuff that we don't like, to stuff that we disapprove of. We have so little for stuff that we like. Does that strike you as being true? I mean, do you get the feeling like we just don't have a whole lot of language, a whole lot of attention that we give to the things that are important to us, that feel good to us, that we like, that we approve of?
Well, I mean, there was a time I felt that way. we as negative wins, negative gets attention, negative has more descriptives, negative literature is very seldom happy. So you write stories, they come up with new adjectives. So there's always some really bad stuff, you know. So we got to have a lot of different ways of saying how bad it is. But at the end of the day, whatever you want to say, that you know something that you love, you don't need many ways to say it because it's so powerful. You don't, in my mind, I just view it differently. Because it is so real, stuff you love, stuff that you cherish, stuff you adore. You don't need as many descriptives because it's so right. If that makes any sense, that's a weird thing to say. It's. I don't need to beat the drum. If I simply say I really love this, I don't. I am. I don't need to double down like I super duper love this. Where I really, that's despicable. I hate this. There's a lot of those descriptives that sort of pile on the adjectives that make it worse, and because you want to make how bad you really hate something. But really loving something, I love it. I don't think love or something you have appreciation for requires as many words. I think that's the difference to me.
I think it's also something to be said for the idea that we just don't even look for them. I think of the phrase, I believe it's from a Shakespearean, it's either a sonnet or one of the plays, I'm not sure which. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. No one can ever tell you what comes after that. Nobody can tell you what the counted ways are. They just know that line. That's it.
Maybe because it's so incredibly boring and stupid that we just can't sit through it. I mean, I couldn't listen to that crap for 10 minutes, so I have no idea. Yeah.
But to me, it's an example of just how little there is that not just how little exists, how little attention we give to it. We let's be honest, we love the negative. We love it. We just live for it.
But it's biologically supported. Evolution supports the negative. We've talked about that before. So negative is the winner. It's protective. People who tend to be negative have historically been protected from stuff. They don't take chances. They are more careful often, and they live longer. And not so much today, but I'm talking about over the years. So it was enhanced through evolution that the negative people tended to go further along the way.
So then I have to bring this back to our topic of consciousness, and I have to ask a very fundamental question. Is consciousness primarily about focusing on negative?
I think consciousness is about focus. It's where you end up going. I think most people's consciousness would be focusing on negative because that's all they know. I think there's other people that get to a place where you can operate fully in consciousness and sort of understand it's not a negative versus a positive. It's just sort of every day is that. Every day is your existence. Every day is that. And there's going to be things you like, things you don't like. And when you figure out that the more energy you put toward this is where the law of attraction comes in. You put toward what you do like, that's where that energy starts attracting for you. And I think that's how we get there. But I think most people have consciousness has been raised, so to speak, or created within a negative vacuum. My mom, when we were younger, she did it intentionally, but she was so anxious and so worried and so negative and so many things that my programming as a child was all negative bias.
Yeah. And I think it's actually fairly common.
Yes.
That's what made me raise the question. That's what made me wonder. I do agree with you that consciousness, if we look at it as a concept, it makes sense that it's merely about focus. Whether or not it's negative or positive is almost irrelevant to what consciousness actually is.
Yes.
Yeah, but it's so easy to be kind of distracted by, wow, consciousness pays a whole lot of attention to negative.
Well, it does, but again, I just think that's society. That's I believe there's a change in that when you figure out a bias toward positive, a bias toward action, a bias toward positive thinking, perspective. That's when you have your awakening, and a lot of people never get there, and they they die trapped within this sort of loop of whatever that is. They're still conscious, but they don't get full utilization of their conscious abilities.
It's certainly understandable how various spiritual theories evolve over things like karma. The idea that, well, if you don't learn in this lifetime, you come back for another lifetime to do it and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I can see where people would come to that conclusion just for the exact reason you just named, that people will go through the entire lifetime and not actually shift away from it. Well, so of course they're going to come back for another lifetime to deal with it. It's a logical conclusion that comes after that.
That would make a lot of sense. I mean, and I'm not saying I don't necessarily believe we come back for lessons, but
I don't really believe it either.
I think we come back, but I think it's just because, as Esther Hicks said, when you're pure energy, you don't know you can't describe how chocolate tastes. You got to come back to taste the chocolate.
That's right.
You got to, the up and down and all that. That's why we come back. But I feel that consciousness is, we can agree that through conversation, through thought, independent thought, there's some definition of consciousness for most people. The debate will always rage that, it all takes place in the brain. There's like a lot of the studies of near-death experiences and reports, they often are automatically tried to be discounted. You know what I mean? It's like, well, it's the DMT that's in your brain that makes all that stuff happen, or but there's accounts of people that die and they literally witness their death in the emergency room, and they can describe what's going on.
Right.
And in the book, they're talking about, one of the things they talk about is, I don't remember if it was a man or woman, was in the emergency room. It sounds like a woman, maybe, if I'm thinking correctly. And she died on the table, and they were trying to revive her.
Mm-hmm.
And she was watching that from above. And so as we got to, I don't know exactly what foul language the doctor, but he was like getting pretty vile with it, like screaming at people to get this done. We got to say, blah, 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 and a lot of, profanity. And so afterwards, and she, when she woke up, and she said, I watched me die. I watched you guys work on me. And everybody's sort of like, yeah, well, you probably, whatever. Because she was dead. I mean, she was flatlined for about 45 seconds.
Right. Okay.
And so they're like, yeah, they dismissed it. And she looked at the doctor and she goes, you need to watch your mouth too. And he goes, why? Because you just went on you were screaming all this, and she told him what he said.
Yeah.
And she was dead, I mean, technically, during that time. And so anyway, the idea that these things happen and we can't, we want an explanation, yes or no, always. We always want it to be simple.
Mm-hmm.
But if your perspective isn't based on believing that type thing, you're never going to believe it. You're never going to believe it. You're always going to dismiss it. And there's no way to prove it, is the problem. Like you said earlier, there is no proof in this.
Yeah, there's no way to do it. Right.
But so when people want to talk to me like about my belief in the law of attraction, and they said, can you prove it? I go, I can prove it based on my proof. I can prove it in my life. I can prove how it worked for me. You're going to say that's not scientific evidence. I'm good with that. But my life changed when I came up with this way of thinking. And it's been, it's made me incredibly successful. It's made me happy. I cured my addiction, my depression, my anxiety. I have the life that I love because of this concept that I discovered. And, people say, well, that, and they'll dismiss it. I don't, it doesn't matter. But I really, with all my heart, know that it works for me. That's not proof for the scientific community or anybody else, but it worked for me. It's worked for you. It's worked for thousands of people I know.
Yeah, I like that. That's kind of a good way to summarize it. There's one other piece I want to bring in. It's almost tangential, but to me, it actually ties the whole thing together. Because on this whole topic of consciousness and expression of consciousness and what is it, and what does it mean to be conscious and to have perspective and so forth? Why are we here? We're now into the realm of eternal questions, right? The questions that people can't really answer, but they try to answer anyway. I'm always reminded of the writings of Richard Bach. And for those who don't know Richard Bach wrote a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. He wrote another book called Illusions, one called One. There's a whole bunch of them. But he was writing all this stuff before Abraham Hicks, before any of the modern teachers. He was writing this stuff back in the 60s and 70s. And he wrote a number of things that I really, really liked. If you've never, I've talked with Louis D'Souza a few times about the book Illusions. If you haven't read Illusions, I thoroughly recommend it. It's the best law of attraction book written in fiction form I've ever read. It's fabulous. Oh, wow. Really, really good. And it's a quick read. You can read it in an evening, but read the book. But anyway, one of the concepts that comes out of that is he's challenged by this spiritual leader to answer a question. He says, what are the main reasons for living in life? What do you get out of it? I mean, if you had to identify what it comes down to, what are you here for? And he says, well, I'm here to learn. Okay, learning, that's good. What else are you here for? Well, because I enjoy it. Okay, to have fun. So that's another one. What else? Well, everything he comes up with after that is either falling into the category of learning or having fun. And when you were talking about how our perspective is all about what are we learning, what are the lessons, and how do we feel about it? That's another example to me of, well, it's either about learning or having fun or some combination of the two. We talked earlier about how neither one of us really totally buy into the idea of karma as it's usually expressed. And I think this is the reason why for me. Karma is great if you're having fun with it. If you're not having fun with it, why would you want to do it?
Yeah, I agree. That makes complete sense.
Yeah. And just by thinking about it that way, now all of a sudden I take all the weight of all the negativity out of it because, well, am I having fun with it or not? If I'm not, then why am I going to give my attention to it?
Yeah.
If I am having fun with it, then I'm going to give lots of attention to it. And if it happens to be negative, fine. That's my choice.
Yeah.
Having fun is a subjective experience. There's nothing objectively fun. There's only subjective fun. So
yeah, I mean that's the definition of fun. What's fun to me won't be fun to you. Clearly,
that's right.
I mean, in our sports choices.
Well, sometimes it will be.
Yeah, sometimes, occasionally. Yeah.
Well, you're from Florida. You grew up in Florida. My football team is the Miami Dolphins. So we have a little similarity going on there. Something.
Yeah. I mean, okay. The fact there's a team in Miami called the Dolphins. That's good.
Well, not only do I knew that, I actually knew that. Believe it or not, Joel, I actually knew that. In 1970, when I saw an interview with a young coach named Don Shula, and in that interview, he was talking about, he was asked how he was going to take this team that was basically an AFL team. This was when the AFL and NFL had come together to form the new NFL, and how he was going to make this team competitive in the NFL because they didn't have a lot of skilled players. And what was he going to do to get these guys who couldn't do certain things to do things they couldn't do? He says, I never do that. He says, I don't ask players to do what they can't do. I ask them to do what they can do very, very well. And that's what made me a Miami Dolphins fan. I didn't even know who the Miami Dolphins were. I said, I like this guy. I got to follow this guy.
Yeah. And 2 years after that, he had the first perfect season and the only perfect season.
The only one.
And the only one to this day. So
that's right.
Yeah, good coach. Good coach. Yeah, that's fantastic. And the concepts of all of this stuff and all these debates and to me I get to the bottom line. I wake up every day. I believe that the first thing I must do before I walk out the door is I must adjust my perspective. I must. And that's my consciousness at play. I can't leave this house with my perspective not in the right direction. If I do, we're going to be, the potential for not having a good day is there. And so perspective, consciousness to me, and all, I don't have the answers to all of it. I just know what I feel. I'm very aware of my consciousness, and one of the differences too. As I explain to people, tomorrow I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to the gym, then I'm going to go drive to work. I do that every single day, pretty much in the same order. I drive to work the same way. And I don't remember driving to work most days. I just drive the same way every day. And unless something happens, there's a wreck or there's a change, I have to go around, then I have to pull out of the subconscious driving and get conscious where I'm going. So I'm operating most of my day in the basic stuff with the subconscious or the not conscious brain. It's just built in. Now, the consciousness is so infused that when I need to pop out of subconscious, it's immediately available. So it's certainly adjacent to, if not in the middle of, it's all there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And that's really what the nub of the whole thing is. This has been a fun conversation as usual. We always have these really fun conversations. I love how you find a book that you picked up on Audible and say, oh, there's a basis for a conversation right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's cool. Just keep doing that so we can have more topics. It makes it really easy.
Yeah. I've got some new ones coming up this week, so I'll see which one I like the most.
Sounds great. So I won't be talking to you next week. Next week is New Year's, but I'll be talking to you the following week. So I'll see you in a couple weeks. All right.
Yes.
So sounds good. We will be doing other episodes between now and then. Just I won't be talking to Joel until then. So my friend, I'll look forward to talking to you at that point. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.